Jake Morrison always thought he was nothing special. His best moment at work was fixing the coffee maker in Sector 7 without getting shocked. His boss said this was unusual. So when plasma bombs started falling on Kepler 442 like really bad fireworks, Jake's first thought was to hide in a tunnel with a book and wait until everything stopped. The communications tower had been empty for 3 days. Enemy fire had melted half of it. Jake thought it was the perfect hiding spot until the fighting ended. He brought his tools, some food bars, and an old book about fusion reactors. He was reading and thinking the book might be wrong when he heard crying sounds. "Oh, come on," he said quietly, putting down his book. "I'm trying to have a quiet panic here." The sound came from behind a broken wall. Jake pushed through the gap with his flashlight and stopped moving. A woman lay against the far wall. She was breathing in short, weak breaths. She looked human. 2 arms, 2 legs, everything normal except her ears. They were long and pointed, hanging down like she was in pain or very sad. "Well," he said, kneeling next to her, "this is either a big joke or I'm about to help someone even though I don't want to." The woman opened her eyes. They were the color of golden honey. She said something in a language that sounded like wind chimes arguing with a computer. "Right." "No translator," Jake said, searching through his tools. "Let me guess. You want help or you're cursing my family. Either way, stay still." He had basic medical supplies. Nothing fancy. The woman had a bad cut on her arm and burns from energy weapons. While he worked, she watched him very carefully. "You know," he said, putting fake skin on her wound, "most people would be screaming now. Either you're really brave or you have really good pain medicine." She tilted her head. Her strange ears moved slightly. Then she smiled in a way that needed no words. "There we go," Jake said. "Medical failure. The one language everyone understands." Over the next few hours, they found ways to talk. She pointed at herself and made a sound like Lyra. He pointed at himself and said Jake, which she repeated like music. "So, Lyra," he said, sharing his food bar, "what brings you to this war zone? Tourism? Bad directions? Secret alien stuff I shouldn't know about?" She pointed toward the window where the battle sounds had gotten quieter. Her face looked sad. She touched her chest, then moved her hand to mean the whole planet. "Ah," Jake said. "Your people are fighting and you're stuck here with the worst doctor ever." He took a bite of his food bar. "Well, good news is I have 3 days of food and an interesting book about reactors. Bad news is I think my school counselor was right when she said I had no dreams." Lyra's ears stood up. She laughed. It sounded like bells floating in space. Jake decided that making an alien laugh during a war was probably worth putting on his work history. By the second day, they had a routine. Jake would try to explain human things while fixing the broken tower systems because he couldn't help himself. Lyra would answer with hand movements and faces that meant either deep cultural sharing or polite confusion. "See, the thing about humans," Jake said, "fixing a broken communication wire, is we make everything harder than it needs to be. Take this war. I'm sure there's a smart reason for all the shooting, but I bet it started with someone getting their feelings hurt." Lyra nodded seriously. Then she pointed at herself, then at Jake, then locked her fingers together. "Friends?" Jake asked. "Yeah, I can do friends. Warning though, I'm boring. My idea of adventure is trying a new flavor of food paste." On the 3rd day, the sky filled with ships. Not the angry warships that had been bombing the planet, but smooth ships that seemed to dance through the air. They shined with patterns that looked almost alive. They came down gracefully like birds coming home. "Your people?" Jake asked. Lyra nodded, but her face showed mixed feelings. She stood up, testing her hurt leg, and grabbed Jake's hand hard. She spoke quickly in her musical language. Her ears stood straight up, which Jake knew meant something important. "Hey, it's okay," he said. "You're safe now. This is where we say goodbye, right? You go back to your people. I go back to fixing things that shouldn't be broken." But Lyra didn't let go of his hand. She pressed something into his palm. It felt warm against his skin. Then she leaned forward and kissed his forehead so gently that Jake forgot to breathe. The rescue ships landed perfectly. Armed people in fancy armor ran toward the tower. As they got closer, Jake saw they all had the same long ears as Lyra, but theirs were decorated with complex jewelry that caught the light like stars. "Okay," Jake said quietly. "I'm starting to think my new friend might be more important than she told me." The guards surrounded Lyra with clear relief and barely controlled worry. One of them, whose armor was so fancy it probably had its own gravity, walked up to Jake looking grateful but suspicious. Lyra spoke quickly to the fancy guard, pointing at Jake many times. The guard's face changed from suspicious to something like respect or fear or both. "I really hope she's telling you I'm harmless," Jake said. "Because I am extremely harmless. I once said sorry to a door after walking into it." As they got ready to leave, Lyra turned back to Jake one last time. Her golden eyes held something that made his chest feel tight. Her ears stood up straight in a way that seemed to promise something. Then she was gone, taken away by her people toward ships that looked like they were made of crystal dreams. Jake stood alone in the ruined tower, holding the small device she gave him. He wondered if he had just lived the most important 3 days of his life, or if this was just the start of something much more complicated than fixing reactors. Far away, the war kept going, but somehow it seemed smaller now. Less important than the memory of golden eyes and laughter like bells in space. 6 months later, Jake Morrison was back to his normal life of fixing things that other people broke badly. His apartment on Luna Station was exactly how he left it. Small, messy, and with a coffee machine that sounded like a dying whale but made drinks that had caffeine in them. He had almost convinced himself that the whole Kepler 442b thing was just a stress dream. Almost. The small device Lyra gave him sat by his bed. It sometimes pulsed with soft blue light. His scanner said it was made of unknown energy that probably won't kill you. "Probably," Jake said, stirring his morning coffee with a small torch because he lost his spoon again. "Story of my life." The emergency broadcast interrupted his breakfast like an explosion. Every screen in his apartment turned on, showing the Earth Defense Force logo, then a message that made Jake choke on his coffee. "This is Admiral Chin with an urgent message for all Earth citizens. We are talking with the Zahirian Empire about one of our civilians. Jake Morrison of Luna Station. If you get this message, please contact Earth Defense immediately. Do not try to leave where you are." "Well," Jake said to his coffee machine, "this is new." His door chimed. Then it chimed again. Then it kept chiming while someone pounded on it like a battering ram. "Jake Morrison," a voice shouted. "Earth Defense Force. Open up." Jake opened the door to find 3 officers in full battle gear, their weapons turned off but clearly there. Behind them stood a woman in normal clothes whose face said she'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. "Mr. Morrison," she said, showing her ID. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chin, alien culture expert. We need to talk about my parking tickets? Because I can explain the one from Thursday." "About this," Dr. Chin said, showing a tablet with what looked like every news feed in known space. Jake's face stared back at him from dozens of screens with headlines like "Human Hero Saves Alien Princess" and "Space Romance Shocks Galaxy." "I'm sorry." "What now?" Dr. Chin touched the tablet and a hologram filled Jake's living room. The figure that appeared was Lyra, but not how he remembered her. The wounded refugee in torn clothes was gone. This was a queen in robes that seemed to contain actual starlight. Her long ears wore jewelry that probably cost more than Jake's entire space station. "People of the galaxy," the hologram began. Her voice carried the power of someone who ruled star systems. I stand before you as Queen Lyra of the Zahirian Empire to make an announcement that will bind our realm to a new future. Jake's coffee cup fell from his hands and broke on the floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. 6 months ago, during the liberation of Kepler 442b, I was saved by a human warrior whose courage and kindness restored my faith in the galaxy's ability to be good. Jake Morrison of Earth showed me that true strength is not in conquest, but in caring for others. Warrior? Jake squeaked. I fixed a communication tower and shared my lunch. Therefore, the hologram continued, according to the ancient laws of our people, I formally declare my intention to take Jake Morrison as my husband. The wedding will happen within 1 month, and all systems are invited to witness the union of our empires. The hologram smiled. Jake noticed her ears were standing at perfect attention, which he knew meant she was either very determined or very nervous. The Zahirian Empire extends its friendship to Earth and looks forward to a new time of cooperation between our peoples. Jake Morrison, my beloved, I wait for you aboard the Imperial flagship Star Whisperer. The stars themselves sing of our destiny. The hologram disappeared, leaving Jake's apartment in shocked silence. So, Jake said slowly, I'm guessing this is bad? Dr. Chen pulled up another screen showing massive ships hanging in Earth's orbit like metal storm clouds. The Zahirian fleet arrived 3 hours ago. They've been very polite, but they're also very armed and they're not leaving until you give them an answer. What if I say no? According to their culture, refusing a royal marriage announcement is considered an act of war by about 1 billion Zahirians. Jake sat down hard on his couch. I shared a food bar with her. How does that turn into marriage? Apparently, spending time together during a crisis creates a spiritual bond in their culture. The fact that you treated her injuries and protected her for 3 days makes you legally engaged under Zahirian law. But I didn't know she was a princess. Queen, Dr. Chen corrected. She inherited the throne 2 months ago, which makes this much more complicated. Jake's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, chose that moment to lean through his open door. Jake, dear, there are some very large spaceships outside, and they're asking for you. Also, congratulations on your engagement. I always knew you'd marry someone important. Mrs. Patterson, Jake said weakly. Now is not the time. Nonsense. I brought cookies for the diplomats. The ones with the long ears are very polite, though they keep asking about your heroic deeds. I had to explain that fixing the building's air system isn't exactly fighting dragons. One of the military officers stepped forward. Mr. Morrison, you need to understand the situation. Earth's entire relationship with the Zahirian Empire, one of the most powerful civilizations in this galaxy, now depends on your personal decision. No pressure, Jake said quietly. The device on his table began pulsing faster, its blue light growing brighter. Dr. Chen's scanner started beeping wildly. Mr. Morrison, she said, what is that device? A gift from Lyra. It's been mostly decorative until now. The device showed a small hologram of Lyra, but this one was different. More personal, less formal. She was in what looked like her private rooms, and her face was hopeful rather than royal. Jake, she said, I hope this message finds you well. I know my public announcement may have surprised you, but I wanted you to hear the truth from me personally. What we shared during those 3 days was real. Your kindness, your humor, your gentle spirit. These things are rare in the galaxy and even rarer in the life of a queen. Jake felt something twist in his chest as he watched her ears droop slightly. I will not force you to accept, but I hope you will consider it. The universe is big and lonely, but with you, I think it might be less of both. The choice is yours, Jake Morrison. Whatever you decide, you will always have my gratitude and my friendship. The hologram faded, leaving Jake staring at the empty space where her image had been. Well, Mrs. Patterson said cheerfully. She seems nice. A little formal, but nice. And those ears are quite striking. Dr. Chen cleared her throat. Mr. Morrison, we need your decision. The Zahirian group is requesting a formal meeting within the hour. Jake looked around his small apartment. At his broken coffee machine and his scattered books. At the life he'd built out of comfortable nothing special. Then he thought about golden eyes and silver laughter. About 3 days when he felt like he might actually matter to someone. If I say yes, he said slowly, what happens to Earth? Best case, we become allies with one of the galaxy's superpowers. Worst case, you become a very comfortable prisoner of war. And if I say no? Best case, they leave peacefully and we never hear from them again. Worst case, we find out what active war means to a civilization that can easily park a fleet in our orbit. Jake picked up the device, feeling its warm pulse against his hand. Somewhere out there, beyond the cold stars, a queen was waiting for his answer. A queen who remembered the taste of his terrible food bars and the sound of his nervous jokes in the darkness. You know what? He said. I've spent my whole life fixing broken things. Maybe it's time to see if I can fix something that isn't broken yet. Dr. Chen raised an eyebrow. Is that a yes? That's a let's go meet some aliens and see if I'm about to make the best decision of my life or the worst mistake in galactic history. Mrs. Patterson clapped her hands. How exciting. I'll bring more cookies. The Zahirian shuttle felt like flying inside a soap bubble made of liquid starlight. Jake pressed his face against the clear wall, watching Earth shrink to a blue marble as they got closer to the massive flagship Star Whisperer. The ship looked less like a war vessel and more like someone had convinced a mountain to float gracefully through space. First time on a Zahirian ship? Asked his escort. A dignified alien whose ears were so long they'd been braided with silver thread. I'm Commander Velter, and I'll be your cultural guide. Does that mean you're here to stop me from accidentally starting a war? Jake asked. Among other things, yes. For instance, please don't touch anyone's ears without permission. It's considered either a marriage proposal or a challenge to fight, depending on how firmly you grip. Right. No ear touching. Got it. Jake paused. What about accidental ear touching? Like if I trip? Pray you don't trip. The landing area of the Star Whisperer was big enough to hold a small city. It was filled with beings whose ear lengths varied from barely pointed to magnificently long. Jake noticed that the longer-eared people seemed to get more respect, while those with shorter ears did more basic work. Genetic ranking system, Commander Velter explained, noticing Jake's observation. Ear length shows both noble bloodline and mental power. The Queen's ears are among the longest in recorded history. And mine are completely round, Jake said. What does that make me? Unique. Also, according to our scientists, either highly evolved or badly deformed. The jury's still out. They walked through hallways that seemed to pulse with their own light, past rooms where gravity flowed like water and gardens that grew in impossible spirals through the air. Jake's engineering mind was frantically noting technologies that shouldn't exist, while his survival instincts were screaming that he was way over his head. Mr. Morrison, Commander Velter said as they approached a fancy door. Before we meet the Queen, there are some rules you should know. First, never turn your back on royalty. Second, if she offers you food, you must accept at least one bite. Third, if anyone challenges your honor, immediately find me or another court official. Why would someone challenge my honor? Because you're about to marry the most powerful woman in the galaxy, and half the nobles think you're either a spy or completely unworthy. The other half think you're some kind of chosen one. Both groups are equally dangerous. The throne room was a wonder of crystal design that seemed to exist in more dimensions than Jake's brain could understand. Nobles with elaborately decorated ears lined the walls. Their conversations created a musical background that sounded like an orchestra warming up. At the center, on a throne that looked like it had been carved from one massive gem, sat Lyra. She was exactly as Jake remembered and completely different. The injured refugee was gone, replaced by a queen whose presence seemed to bend the very air around her. Her robes changed color like oil on water. Her crown, a delicate creation of metal and light, perfectly framed her magnificently long ears. "Jake," she said, and her voice carried across the vast room with perfect clarity. "You came." "Well," Jake said, walking toward the throne on unsteady legs, "I figured I should at least hear the job description before deciding whether to run screaming." Lyra's ears twitched with barely held amusement. Several nobles gasped at his casual manner, but the queen's smile was bright. "My beloved speaks with the directness of a true warrior," she announced to the court. "Such honesty is refreshing." "Your Majesty," said a noble whose ears were adorned with gems, "perhaps we should discuss the details of this union in private council." "There's nothing to discuss, Lord Calvarian," Lyra said firmly. "My decision is made. Jake Morrison has proven his worth through actions, not bloodlines." "But Majesty," another noble protested, "he is not of our kind. He has no understanding of our ways, no." "He treated my wounds when I was helpless," Lyra interrupted. "He shared his food when he had little. He asked for nothing in return. What more noble breeding could there be?" Jake raised his hand tentatively. Not to interrupt, but I should probably mention that I have no idea what I'm doing here. I fix things for a living. Important things, sure, but things. People are much more complicated." "Nonsense," said a new voice. A Zahirian with medium-length ears and what looked like a tool belt approached. "Gareth, Tinker Prime, Chief Engineer. I've heard about your work with plasma systems. Very impressive. You've heard of me? The communication array you repaired on Kepler 442b. It's been sending perfect signals for months. Our best technicians couldn't figure out how you made it work with such limited resources." Jake felt a rush of pride. "Well, it was just a matter of bypassing the quantum flux inhibitors and there," Lyra interrupted, her ears standing at full attention, "he speaks of quantum flux inhibitors as if they were simple problems to solve. Tell me, my lords, which of you understand such mysteries?" The court murmured appreciatively. Jake realized he'd somehow passed a test he didn't know he was taking. "Your Majesty," Lord Calvarian said stiffly, "technical skill does not equal royal worthiness." "Perhaps not," said another voice, "but it's more useful than most of what passes for worthiness around here." The speaker was younger than the other nobles, with ears that were long but not decorated. Jake recognized the confident stance of someone who didn't care what others thought. "My brother, Prince Thalarin," Lyra said with a mix of affection and warning in her voice. "Charmed," Thalarin said, studying Jake with clear interest. "So you're the maintenance worker who captured my sister's heart. I have to admit, I'm curious how you managed that." "I shared my food and didn't try to kill her," Jake said. "Apparently the bar was pretty low." Thalarin laughed, a sound that echoed through the throne room. "I like him. He might actually survive court politics." "That remains to be seen," Lord Calvarian muttered. The formal meeting continued for another hour, with various nobles either welcoming Jake or questioning his suitability. By the end, Jake's head was spinning with titles, protocols, and thinly veiled threats. When it was finally over, Lyra led him to a private balcony overlooking the vast expanse of space. "I'm sorry about that," she said, her formal manner softening. "Court politics are exhausting even for those born to them." "It's fine," Jake said, leaning against the railing. "I've dealt with difficult customers before. Though none of them had the power to start interstellar wars." Lyra laughed, a genuine sound that reminded Jake of their time in the tower. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I couldn't say in front of the court." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "That sounds ominous." "During our third day together, when you were trying to explain the plot of some Earth entertainment while rewiring a power coupling, you were so animated, so passionate about something completely trivial. And I realized I'd never met anyone who could find joy in such simple things." "That was the adventures of Captain Neutron," Jake said. "And the plot really is surprisingly complex for a kids' show." Lyra laughed again. "See? That's what I mean. You find wonder in everything. It's rare, especially in my world. There's something else you should know, she said, her expression growing serious. The marriage announcement cannot be taken back. Once spoken before the court, it becomes binding under our law. If you truly wish to leave, you may, but I cannot undo what has been done. And if I stay? Then you become part of something larger than either of us imagined. The union of our peoples. The bridging of two civilizations. The chance to build something new among the stars. Jake looked out at the alien stars that would never be home. At the impossible beauty of a universe that had suddenly become his responsibility. You know what? He said. I've spent my whole life fixing things that other people broke. Maybe it's time to help build something that nobody's broken yet. Lyra's ears stood at perfect attention. Her smile was brighter than the stars outside. Besides, Jake added, Mrs. Patterson would never forgive me if I came home without wedding photos. Jake's first week as the Queen's future husband was like learning to swim in a pool filled with liquid politics and occasional gravity reversals. The palace's computer system, which everyone called the Whisper, had been programmed to help him navigate court rules, but it had developed what Jake suspected was a sense of humor. Lord Calvarian approaches from your left, the Whisper announced in his brain implant. He's carrying a ceremonial blade, which either means he's planning to honor you or end your existence. Based on his body readings, I'd estimate 60% chance of the latter. Thanks for the comfort, Jake muttered, turning to face the approaching noble with what he hoped was a confident smile. Mr. Morrison, Lord Calvarian said, his voice dripping with the kind of politeness that usually came before murder attempts. I trust you're adapting well to court life? Like a fish to space, Jake replied. Badly and with lots of confused flailing. The Whisper chimed softly in his head. That was actually diplomatic. He's reconsidering his threat level. Lord Calvarian's ears twitched with what might have been reluctant amusement. Your honesty is refreshing. Perhaps you would join me for a tour of the palace's lower levels. There are some fascinating engineering systems that might interest you. Is this the part where I mysteriously disappear? Jake asked. Not today. I'm genuinely curious about your technical abilities. The quantum flux inhibitor repair has become something of a legend among our engineers. 3 hours later, Jake found himself deep in a gravity field generator that had been broken for decades. The lower levels of the palace were a maze of impossible technologies tended by Zahirians with shorter ears who seemed genuinely excited to meet him. The problem, explained Chief Technician Mordek, whose ears barely peeked above his hairline, is that nobody wants to admit they don't understand the ancient systems. So we just keep adding patches until everything barely works. Classic engineering problem, Jake said, adjusting his scanner. Like putting a bandage on a basic design flaw. He paused, studying the readings. Wait, this isn't broken. It's just been programmed by someone who apparently thought gravity was optional. You can fix it? Mordek asked. Hopefully. I can try. Fair warning though. I once fixed a replicator so well that it started improving my coffee. I came back to find it had become self-aware and was writing poetry about the nature of caffeine. The repair took 6 hours and involved rewiring several systems that Jake was pretty sure weren't supposed to exist in the same dimension. When he finally turned on the generator, the artificial gravity in the entire section stabilized for the first time in living memory. Incredible, Lord Calvarian said, and Jake heard genuine respect in his voice. You've done in one day what our best technicians couldn't do in years. I had an advantage, Jake said, wiping his hands on a cloth that Mordek had provided. I don't know enough about your technology to be scared of it. News of Jake's success spread through the palace faster than gossip about scandal. By evening, he found himself surrounded by nobles who suddenly seemed interested in his unique view on various technical challenges. The quantum waste disposal system in the East Wing has been making disturbing noises, mentioned Lady Zephania, whose ears were decorated with small bells that chimed when she moved. Perhaps you could look at it. The hydroponics bay's air processors are producing what I can only describe as aggressive vegetables, added Lord Thessarian. The carrots have developed a concerning level of awareness. Jake was starting to suspect that the palace's technology was held together by hopeful thinking and the occasional miracle. I'll add them to my list, he said diplomatically. Right after I figure out why my shower this morning tried to scan my DNA and suggest lifestyle improvements. That evening, Jake found Lyra in her private study. She was surrounded by holographic displays showing star charts, economic reports, and what appeared to be a real-time count of every living being in the Empire. Rough day? He asked, settling into a chair that shaped itself to his body with disturbing enthusiasm. 3 trade disputes, 2 border fights, and a minor rebellion on Kepler-7, she said without looking up. The usual. How is your day fixing things? I accidentally became a folk hero among the engineering staff by making gravity work properly. Also, your brother invited me to a friendly sparring match tomorrow, which the whisper tells me is either a bonding ritual or a socially acceptable way to murder me. Lyra's ears drooped. Thalarin is complicated. He's not evil, but he's ambitious. He sees my marriage to you as a threat to the Empire's stability. Is he wrong? I don't know, she admitted. Half the noble houses think I'm making a mistake that will weaken our position in the galaxy. The other half think I'm making a mistake that will strengthen it too much. Either way, it's apparently a mistake. Jake moved to stand behind her chair, careful not to touch her ears. You know what I think? What? I think you're the first queen in galactic history who's worried more about her people than her crown. That's either the mark of a great leader or someone who's about to lose power to people with better political instincts. Very comforting, Lyra said dryly. I'm still working on my motivational speaking skills. Give me time. She turned to face him. Jake was struck by how tired she looked. Jake, what if I'm wrong about this? What if I'm letting my personal feelings cloud my judgment? Then you'll figure it out and fix it, he said simply. That's what you do. You fix things. Just like I fix broken machines, you fix broken situations. And if I can't? Then we'll figure it out together. That's what partners do, right? Lyra's ears stood at attention and she smiled for the first time all day. Partners. Well, I assume that's what husbands and wives are when they're not being galactic political symbols. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the communication system. A hologram appeared. Admiral Chen from Earth Defense. Your Majesty, the Admiral said, her face grim. We've detected a fleet of unknown vessels approaching the edge of your territory. They're not responding to messages and their energy patterns don't match any known civilization. How many ships? Lyra asked, instantly shifting into command mode. Our long-range sensors count at least 50 vessels, possibly more. They'll reach your outer systems within 3 days. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the palace's temperature control. Please tell me this is a coincidence. I'm afraid not, Admiral Chen said. The fleet appeared shortly after news of your engagement spread through the diplomatic channels. Someone somewhere is not happy about the alliance between Earth and the Zahirian Empire. After the transmission ended, Jake and Lyra sat in the sudden silence of the study. So, Jake said finally, mysterious enemy fleet, political intrigue, and a sparring match with your potentially homicidal brother. Tuesday is shaping up to be interesting. Jake, Lyra said quietly. You could still leave. Return to Earth. Be safe. This isn't your war. With respect, Your Majesty, Jake said, I think you're wrong. The moment I decided to help a wounded stranger in a bombed-out tower, this became my war. Besides, someone needs to keep the palace's gravity working properly, and I've apparently got a reputation to maintain. Lyra's ears drooped with what Jake now recognized as overwhelming emotion. I love you, she said simply. I love you too, Jake replied, surprised by how true it felt. Even if your brother is going to try to kill me tomorrow. He won't kill you, Lyra said. Seriously injure you perhaps, but not kill you. That would be poor form. Again with the motivational speaking, Jake said. We really need to work on that. Outside the study's windows, the stars seemed a little less friendly than they had that morning. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his quiet life as a maintenance engineer was about to become much more complicated. The sparring match with Prince Thalarin went better than expected, if better meant Jake had only been unconscious for 10 minutes instead of permanently. He'd woken up to find the prince offering him a hand up and what might have been genuine respect in his eyes. You fight like an engineer, Thalarin had said. Methodical, adaptive, and completely unpredictable. I can work with that. Does this mean you're not going to stage a coup? Jake had asked, accepting the help. Oh, I'm absolutely going to stage a coup, Thalarin had replied cheerfully. Just not against you. Against the idiots who think they can threaten my sister's happiness. That had been 12 hours ago. Now Jake stood in the palace's main communication center, watching 3 different fleets move towards Zahirian space like the galaxy's most dangerous dance party. The mysterious attackers had been identified as the hegemony of Velter, a militaristic alliance that viewed the Earth-Zahirian Union as a threat to their expansion plans. So, Jake said to Admiral Chen's hologram, they're not here for the wedding cake. Definitely not, Admiral Chen confirmed. Intelligence suggests they plan to conquer Earth after dealing with smaller civilizations. Your marriage created an alliance they can't afford to ignore. I'm flattered that my love life is considered a galactic threat, Jake said. Really? It's more attention than I've gotten since I accidentally rewired the coffee machine to achieve awareness. Lyra stood at the center of the command room. Her crown was replaced by a tactical headset that somehow made her look even more regal. Fleet positions, Commander Velter. Hegemony forces approaching from 3 directions, the commander reported. They're trying to force us into a defensive position around the capital system. And our allies? Earth defense is moving to intercept Direction 2. The Andorian coalition is covering Direction 3. That leaves Direction 1 for us. Jake watched the tactical display with growing understanding. They're not trying to win, he said suddenly. They're trying to make sure everyone loses. Explain, Lyra said. Look at the formation. They're positioning themselves so that any major fight will cause massive casualties on all sides. They win if the alliance collapses, even if they lose the battle. Prince Thalarin leaned over the display. He's right. They're forcing us into a costly victory scenario. So what do we do? Admiral Chen asked. Jake stared at the tactical display, his engineering mind working through the problem. We don't fight them. We fix them. I'm sorry, what? Lyra said. Think about it. They're attacking because they see our alliance as a threat. But what if we turned it into an opportunity instead? Jake, Admiral Chen said carefully, they're shooting at us. Negotiation seems unlikely. Not negotiation. Demonstration. Jake turned to Lyra. How fast can we get me to the Hegemony flagship? Jake Morrison, Lyra said, her ears standing at full alert. If you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, the answer is absolutely not. Why not? I'm apparently the galaxy's most unlikely diplomat. Time to lean into it. Because it's insane, Prince Thalarin said. Also brilliant, but mostly insane. I have a better idea, Lyra said. What if we all go? Your Majesty.